there's two different styles here. We're going to do this that kind of has the sunrise style. And I have these fun prints here that we're going to use. They're just hot cocoa prints that we're just going to take a few pieces and make our fun design. Now, most of the time for paper piecing, so here's our design. Most of the time you're not going to need really big pieces. So you can see the size of this. You don't need a really big piece of material. However, what you do need to ensure, whether you put it on an angle or not, is that it's going to cover the whole piece. So for instance, I wouldn't be able to probably use this piece for number 7 because it doesn't stretch all the way to the end. Okay, so you don't need huge pieces, but you definitely need big enough pieces. So you just make sure you have the right piece. The next thing you're going to do is you're actually going to slice your 2 sections apart. So you'll have this section and then you'll have the sunray section. And the reason you're doing that is you're going to sew each of the sections together separately. Now you don't necessarily have to cut around your edges. That's totally up to you. Now you're going to decide on your design. So I'm going to use this cocoa piece for my inside. And I want to make sure that my piece is going to be big enough for my square here. When I was first doing some trials on this, I did not make my piece big enough and it was very frustrating. So you want a big enough piece, okay? And it doesn't have to be perfect. Notice how like my cut is way off, but it is a big enough piece that I'm going to be able to sew it. All right, so this is piece 1, and then we're going to need a piece 2. And so for my sides this time, I'm going to do some of this kind of gingham in red, and I think I'll do this other cocoa one. Okay, so those are the 2. So I'm going to need 2 pieces of my red and 2 pieces of my cocoa. And I have this cute mat here that I'm going to use to help me cut some squares here. To leave the front side, that's the side that has the actual lines and numbers. You want to be able to see that. So you'll actually put all of your fabric on the wrong side. And when you put your material on, you want wrong sides together with your paper. The other thing you need to be careful of is, so we're doing number 1, which is our big center, and then we're going to do number 2, which is this triangle. Now, if I'm going to sew this, if I just stick this here and I stitch the seam, what's going to happen is I'm going to be stuck one way or the other. So I always want to make sure my raw edge and the raw edge of my seam here, so we kind of did that, it just goes slightly over that raw edge. You see that? So when I actually stitch this, it's going to go where it's supposed to go, and then I can turn this up. Hey, I know that's kind of confusing right now. It'll make more sense as we go along. And one of the ways you can do that is you can hold it up like to a light or something, and that kind of helps you to see through it a little bit better. Or like I just did, I kind of just turned my pattern and made this crease, and then I'm going to turn this over and kind of set it where it should be and pin it. And that's kind of why you want a bigger piece, so that everything kind of sits in the right spot. So I've pinned piece 1 and piece 2 with right sides together. I'm going to turn this over I'm actually going to stitch it now. I'm literally going to just stitch across. Make sure my material's on here, right? Oh, I think I'm going to add one more pin because my material wants to fold. So I'm going to go like this. There. Now it should stay in place. And I'm going to stitch my seam for seam 1 and 2 right across. And you'll notice that I went over about 1/4 of an inch on either side of my material, or I mean of my pattern. And that's good because we're gonna cut this out an extra 1/4 of an inch and give it a seam allowance. Okay, so that's seam 1. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take my pins out. I'm actually going to open this seam and fold back the paper. And I'm going to take my ruler.
Where's Daisy? Daisy.
Daisy went outside. That's my toddler saying hello.
Candy.
And I'm going to
Daisy.
cut across. Okay. So I gave myself a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. It's nice and straight. I'm going to flip this up and I'm going to press it. All right. So here is our finished product. This is just the one piece. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So it looks like this. It looks a little crazy. So now is the time you're going to trim it up. So you're going to leave a 1/4 of an inch all the way around your square. And that just is a seam allowance. So when you add your extra piece, your second half of this mug rug, and you add your backing of your mug rug, that you have a seam allowance and that you're not wasting, or you're not making it smaller. Okay, so there's my 1/4 of an inch. So I showed you this one. This is the first one that I did, and notice I didn't leave my seam allowance. I wasn't really thinking. And so that's why it's much smaller. But this one is the real size that I want, and so that's what you want. So you want to make sure and add that 1/4 of an inch. I just wasn't thinking when I did the first one. It's still cute and it's usable. It's just not the right size for what I want. So you're just, see, I'm just taking this ruler and trimming up the sides. That's all I'm doing. So this is what it looks like all trimmed up. I have my 1/4 of an inch all the way around. And this is the front. So you can see my 4 corners and my inside. Now I kind of like, I should have maybe done a brown or something so that this would pop a little bit more, but in the end it's all going to look really cute. So that's piece 1. Piece 2 looks like this. So it's a little bit more complex, just a few more stitches, but it's not crazy hard. You just have to think before you do anything. So I am going to use, for this one, I'm going to use a brown. I'm also going to use some more of my red. And then I think I'm going to bring in a little bit of this kind of aqua blue color here. You see that? Yeah. So those are the 3 colors that I'm going to do. Now I have 13 pieces. Well, that's not true. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. So you could do 4 fabrics and then you'd have 2 of each. I'm just doing 3. So I'm going to have some that are a little bit different, and that's okay. Remember, you want to make sure that they are big enough pieces for each of the sections. They need to be long enough and wide enough for that widest piece. Okay, so I'm just going to line all of these up and trim them up. Okay, again, I'm doing this on the back. I want the right side of my first piece with the right side of my fabric here. And then I want that first piece, that first seam, to be right sides together as well. So this looks a little weird. this one in particular, and that's just because of the way that the pattern is. Oh wait, hold on, I have to think about this. No, I want it this way. I want it to be this way. Because once I've sewn it, I'm going to fold it back this way. So I'll show you here. So I'm going to stitch this one in. To my center here. And you can stitch from the center out. That's fine too. Whatever works. Sometimes with paper piecing too, I found that I get a lot more threads because I don't want to trim them all because they're all going in the same place. And that's fine. You can trim them all at the end as well. I mean, sewing is, yes, there's rules to sewing, but once you know the rules, you can break them. That's kind of how, at least how I learned. Okay, so I have that first seam. Press it here and press it over. Okay, so there's the first one. Now you'll notice I already made a mistake. You can see this is where my pattern piece goes and my fabric's not quite long enough, which is what I was worried about with my seam allowances. So I'm just gonna have to redo this piece and make sure it works. All right, so this one is much better. You can already see it's covering that whole seam, and that's what you need. So if you have to recut pieces or make sure you have bigger pieces, then do it, because it's better than trying to like figure out the puzzle that is never going to get solved right. So I'm just going to keep going here. You've seen me do it a million times now. I'm just going to fold here. Make sure that I get my seam lined up right. Remember, I have right sides together on this, and the seam that I'm sewing, I want to make sure my fabric will fold the right direction, or else it's just gonna get nasty. Okay, open this up, trim it down. And press. So we've got all those pieces sewn. You can see them here. And now we're going to do the same thing that we did on our other project. And we're going to trim everything to that 1/4 of an inch. So we have that seam allowance in here. So we get the right size mug rug. And then same thing on this side. We're going to trim it to that 1/4 inch. It might be a little bit rougher because we have that where kind of the sun rays all meet here in the middle. So it's a little bit tougher, but it's still fine. But look how nice that looks. Let me move this. Look how pretty that is. And then you can line it up wherever you want on your mug rug, so they'll look together. Now, the next part is actually getting rid of your paper, and you just simply, it's already perforated just like sheets in a notebook, and you just literally start slicing them out. All right, so now I have my 2 sections cut out, section 1 and section 2. They're both papers gone. They're ready to be sewn together. So, and you could, you know, get creative if you wanted to go the other way, or if you wanted to put it on this side. I mean, you can do whatever fits your style. But I'm just gonna go ahead and stitch this together. I'm doing 1/4 of an inch. Seam, because that's what I cut for my seam allowance, if you remember. And I'll just press it like I did everything else. Give it a nice press. It's nice and flat. And that's looking cute. So now I'm going to cut out my back piece, and I'm going to use some Warm and Natural on the inside, just to give it a little bit more thickness for my mug. So. All right, so now I'm going to put my layers together. I'm going to put my batting with the wrong side of my front piece, and then I'm going to do my back piece, right sides together. Just gonna pin these in a few spots. And then I'm going to sew. I'm going to leave an opening somewhere. You could do it on the side, the bottom, top, wherever. I'm going to leave an opening so that I can turn it right side out. And again, I'm just doing 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to get to the edge, turn my corner. If you felt like you had a lot of bulk, you could also grade. I'm not going to do that because I just don't care that much. And then you're going to turn it right side out. Make sure your batting's on one of the sides so that when you turn it, everything stays where it's supposed to stay. And push those corners. You can use like a wooden dowel, or even a pencil or pen works for getting those corners as straight as you can get them. We're finished when everything's nice and pressed. Okay. Isn't that cute? Okay, and then what I would do to close this opening is I'll top stitch all the way around, just so it closes off and it just kind of finishes it. You could hand sew it as well. But there you have it. Your finished little mug rug. You could even stitch in the ditch if you wanted to make things a little bit more pop, but that's kind of the idea. You can see here I didn't finish the edge the same on this one. I top stitched on this one. I just hand sewed, so it definitely has a different look, but they're both very cute and they're both fun.